you waited for 6 years and you have a voucher in hand and you have to utilize that in 90 days. And if you don't, then you lose the whole thing. So there is a sprint happening there. So and finding an apartment that actually would be which has a reasonable rent, meaning you cannot rent a luxury apartment. So it has to be a reasonable rent, and then it also has to be affordable to the renter, meaning they're not spending more than 40% of their income towards rent and utilities. So it's a computation of what is going to be your utilities cost and what is the rent, and can they afford it. Both checks have to be done, and finding someone who would accept it, and the apartment has to pass inspections. So all of this has to happen in 90 days. So doing this without any software assistance is hard, and you can very substantially improve the probability of success, by having software, especially an AI assistant that can do this work, call these apartments for you, and schedule showings for you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the AI InterConnect podcast. I'm Laurent, your host, and this is where founders, operators, and innovators explain the work they do and the real challenges behind it. Today's guest is someone who has built one of the most impactful AI platform in the US affordable housing system. I'm joined by Bejoy Narayana, CEO of Bob.ai, and Bejoy is reshaping how public housing authority, landlords, and renters navigate the voucher ecosystem with automation, AI, and a mission-driven mindset. Bejoy, thanks for being here. Very happy to have you on the show.
Thank you, Lauren. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Then, Bejoy, you have one of the most interesting journey in this space. You started as an engineer, work at IBM, and then transition into building AI solution for housing authorities. Walk me through the moments when the idea for Bob.ai became real for you. What happened before that meeting when with the CEO of the Dallas Housing Authority?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So I was working with IBM. I've been in technology all my career, and all along I had this idea. Like I saw .com start when I started my career in IT as well, and IBM was the leader in AI at that time. IBM Watson was the leader, and then I was working with that group trying to create use cases in the supply chain group with Watson services. So I saw that the technology was rapidly progressing, and Watson capabilities were like progressing every month. So then I knew that AI was going to be the next big thing, and I was pretty interested in it. And that's how the company was founded. No industry focus, taking Watson services and creating chatbots for any industry, any company. And then happenstance, I met with the CEO of Dallas Housing Authority. I was introduced by a mutual contact, Roy Broussard, and it was a lunch meeting, and it went on for many hours. Then he basically introduced me to the industry, and he knew that there was a startup, and he also knew that AI was going to be the thing of the future. And then he was patient enough to explain the problems that their organization was facing. And most of it I didn't understand at that time, what was the details of the industry. It's a very niche with very nuanced processes and so on. But I could understand some of it. And then a use case was immediately agreed on, and then he went into procurement very quickly. And then we delivered that product in about a few weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, if I remember accurately. So that was an inspection optimization solution, optimizing inspections that Dallas Housing Authority is doing across 9 counties, reducing the driving time and ensuring that inspections are conducted in a more efficient manner. So that gave us a quick success in the industry with one use case that was working really well for one customer. Some newspapers wrote about us and so on. And then Troy Broussard was like, he's extremely dynamic CEO who was willing to move very fast. Then he was basically telling us, everything I told you, you can work on all of them. And then any software you can create, and then we would give you priorities. But at the same time, we were also working with some private sector companies, like, creating boards for them. So I made a big decision to cut down everything else and focus on this industry. So essentially, I realized that this is a huge industry if you think about it, not just from the housing authorities alone, but if you think about affordable housing as the industry, 25 million families in the US who would require some rental assistance to be not homeless, and then very large number, about 200,000 are realtors, owners, property managers who play in this market space. So it's a large industry, and the housing authorities are doing almost everything on paper. All the core operations are done on paper, and then they have software that creates a interface with a HUD solution, so which they need to send, and then there is a finance application. That's what they are all operating on. So then I realized that if you could just create a cloud application, that alone would be very useful. On top of it, we could also layer in the AI agents. So that decision was taken over about 6 months. We had, and then we got out of everything else. That was a big decision for us at that time. And then we started focusing on one industry, which is a niche, but if you think about it as affordable housing, it's not that the TAM is quite big and so on. That's a long
Yeah.
story.
No, I love it. It's very, very interesting. And when you may have mentioned it a little bit, when you realized the industry was still operating on paper processes, what did that spark in you?
Yeah, this is even more paper than, I worked in many industries in my in my career, like automotive, railroads, and so on. So the railroads, for example, is quite a paper-based, like old systems and so on, mainframes and so on. So, but this is really paper, like you would see large amounts of paper, actual paper. It's hard to believe, and that's what they would have stored in folders and filed in cabinets. And so then you immediately see an opportunity there, right? And there is good reason why it's paper. If you have time, let me just give a bit of nuance there. So in this particular space, let's say there is a family of, let's say, 3 kids and 4 people or 5 people. The amount of transfer from tax dollars to that specific family is quite substantial. So let's say the rent is 2,500. The family is paying 200. Government is paying 2,300 per month. So that's a very substantial amount of assistance given to compared to, let's say, food stamps, or it's a large amount of money to one family that the government is deciding to give, and that means the amount of paperwork that goes behind it is also a lot. So the way that you verify the income, they are actually qualified to receive this assistance. It's quite a lot of work, and that creates a mountain of paper, and that's what they store in. So once you understand it, then there is a golden opportunity here to create software not for one program, not for one housing authority, not for one city, not for one state, but across the country for all programs. That's the hard part. Everyone is allowed to innovate and create their own processes within their organization, but can you create software that would actually work for everyone? That's probably the reason nobody attempted to create it. You can create it for one agency, but it's not scalable.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I realize the amount of papers. Then for listeners who are not familiar with the public housing system, help us understand the scale of the challenge.
Yeah, it is really interesting to think about, US is, of course, a very rich country. But there are 25 million families who would be homeless. It's a very well-studied number. Different organizations have studied it. Who, if there is no intervention, they would be homeless. If you think about that number, the cities are all unlivable at that point, right? If that many homeless people. And the innovation in the US is that it's going to be a public-private partnership in assisting these families instead of the government owning these buildings. That's how it used to be as part of the New Deal. That's how everything was set up initially, that government would have public buildings, public housing. You may have seen that in New York and so on. So very large apartments owned by the housing authority. But over the years, then I think the society realized that that is probably not the right model. There is concentration of poverty, to an extent concentration of crime and so on. If you do it that way, but if you could have a public-private partnership, then it's real opportunity for everyone. It's called the Housing Choice Voucher Program. You can choose where you want to live, as long as it's not a luxury apartment; it's an affordable apartment. So you can live in any part of the city. So that the solution side is great, but the problem is also very large. A very large number of people who would need it. And then an interesting thing that happened in the market is, you could subsidize, and you could say that, government is going to write a certain amount of the rental check, and then that doesn't actually improve supply, right? If people still have to make more affordable apartments and houses. So then they came up with this idea. Okay, you could also have another program called Lighter, which is the flagship program on that side, where government is incentivizing the construction of these buildings. So instead of writing the rental check, so when you start a project, you could go to the government and say, I'm going to set aside 30% of these units for people who have less than 50% of the median income in my area, who earn, and then you that. There is a option for you to basically get subsidized on your tax instead of paying the taxes. You could use these coupons for that. So that is another brand. So between these two programs, I mean, it's still, I cannot say that the problem is fully answered. It's still a problem, but yeah, it's an ongoing problem, right? I mean, you have a solution, you have a growing problem, so you try to keep up.
Yeah. But what did you see? What did you see firsthand that convinced you this was worth dedicating years of your life to solving?
I mean, a lot of years. I mean, me and the co-founder, it's a lot of years. That many things. First of all, purely from an engineer's point of view, I was looking at a problem where a marketplace can be created. You just focus on one side of the marketplace, and then the other sides would join, because you have one side that would be the housing authorities. If you have them, then the property managers are joining, and then clients are joining. So the acquisition costs are low, and then you have a market side dynamic that is working. It was perfect here. The three-sided marketplace. You acquire a housing authority, and then the other two sides have to join, and then so that's really almost magical. In terms of how inexpensively you can acquire all three sides by just acquiring one side. So that was it. Ticked the box without any question in my mind. More than that, I was also seeing what an impact this was making. So, that was also real. I actually was going to houses, seeing people, and then seeing, hey, this is actually a good apartment, and people are living there, and without that they would be. So I could relate to it, and I could understand, hey, this is needed, and this is something worth working for. And then I started thinking, not that I started thinking, almost everything that I learned, somebody else in the industry told me. People who are so willing to talk to me, and then even though we didn't have anything other than an inspection optimization software, but they were willing to be very generous with their time. I have to mention the chief operating officer of Dallas Housing Authority, David Sapasodi. He had spent his entire life on this in this industry. So he told me once, every technology wave comes to us the last. Cloud, for example, we still have not adopted cloud software, so we want to change it. And they was looking up to a startup with 4 employees to change that. So I thought that was actually trust placed in us by people who have spent their entire life solving a very important problem. So that made me that convinced me, hey, this is a group of people that I can relate to. I have great respect for already, and the problem is big enough, and the market is large. So at some point we could raise money and turn.
That's unbelievable. That's awesome. I mean, you built something very ambitious.
Oh yeah.
A full workflow automation system for PHAs intake, verification, inspection, recertification, landlord workflows. Okay, then walk us through how you designed Bob.ai to solve this specific pain point.
Yeah, Lauren, let me go back to the founding story. All that we wanted to build initially was agents, AI agents, an AI agent that would take inspections, 1,500 inspections that need to be done in the month of November and optimize it. And then software will take care of it. Some other software will take care of it. Then we realize that there isn't any other software to take care of it. It's done on paper. So there isn't any other place where we could get data and then do this and send some data back and so on. So that was a realization. So we got into the industry without really knowing that. And then we learned that this software can be made. So this was then by customers telling us, hey, look, our big problem here is contracting with the landlords. So we have to write essentially a three-way contract between a private landlord, a client who has low income and therefore approved to receive assistance, and the government agency, which is the housing authority. It's a three-way contract. You can think about it that way. It's called the request for tenancy approval and housing assistance payments. There are two contracts there. So that's acronyms. So its industry is full of acronyms. So that's one thing. So, and it's essentially a three-way contract. So that is the most difficult part here. It's a lot of paperwork here. Approval of one contract is taking us 8 weeks, and you create software for that. So that then meant that they were willing to put in time to tell us what need to be done. So they were willing to basically test it for us and then tell us, hey, no, this is not how it should be. And there are quite sophisticated calculations and so on involved here. If you have a few minutes, I'll just go into the little bit of details on that particular example. So do you want me to give a bit technical detail here?
No. I love it. No. This is great. Then, okay, then one step at a time. One thing you said in our pre-call was that struck with me was that so many renters with voucher where the leave changes their entire life trajectory.
Yeah.
Can you explain how Bob.ai connects landlord, renters, and agency in a way that increases the housing access?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
If it makes
So
sense.
you are more interested in the human side of the story. Yeah. So that's a big one. In the US, where people live, that matters a lot. Life trajectory could seriously be different if you live in one spot in the city, one place in the city versus another space, usually in the suburb. That's very true. Better schools and so on. Everyone knows it. There is no secret in it. And I've gone to a lot of these families, spoken to a lot of people. I know that it's the same as any other cross section of the society. People are ambitious, people are driven, some people are not, and the same thing. So being able to live in a high opportunity area, that can make a big difference. That's for people who have received assistance. If you are able to, then you are able to send your kids to better schools and you're able to go to work, and then things change. And there is also the question of people getting into the program. You have waited for 6 years and you have a voucher in hand and you have to utilize that in 90 days. And if you don't, then you lose the whole thing. So there is a sprint happening there. So and finding an apartment that actually which has a reasonable rent, meaning you cannot rent a luxury apartment, right? It has to be a reasonable rent, and then it also has to be affordable to the renter, meaning they're not spending more than 40% of their income towards rent and utilities. So it's a computation of what is going to be your utilities cost and what is the rent, and can they afford it. So both checks have to be done. And finding someone who would accept it, and the apartment has to pass inspections. So all of this has to happen in 90 days. So doing this without any software assistance is hard, and you can very substantially improve the probability of success, by having software, especially an AI assistant that can do this work, call these apartments for you, and schedule showings for you.
Okay.
At scale, this can make a meaningful difference to the outcomes.
Yeah, definitely. And Fannie Mae found these renters stay 8.5 years on average. Why does that matter for landlords, for example?
That's huge. The usual turnaround is 1.5 years. That's 8.5 you have to contrast it with market renters who usually rents for about 1.5 years. That's also very well studied number. At 8.5, Fannie Mae has been consistent. It's not like they have done a small study and came up with this number. It is a very large research. So and that number is very solid, and then think about it, like when a renter leaves, you have all these costs, right? Painting and making ready, that alone is cost, and you usually lose rent in between. Then there is this commissions to the agents who would actually find you a renter. All of that is gone for a very long period of time. You have steady rent. And think about the rent collection risk. So that's even more important. In the affordable housing space, rent collection is a risk. You can have a renter who is not paying rent. But when you are renting through this program, government is writing the check, so you're always going to get it, like the bigger check. The smaller check is also not at risk, because if they don't pay it, then someone who is paying, let's say, $200 for a $2,000 rental apartment, so they would write that check as a first check, like that they write, because if they don't do it, then they are homeless. I mean, you're only paying 200, but then you have. So there is hardly any. I mean, there is enough data that people can verify. There is hardly any rent collection risk there. So combined, this is a really attractive way to find renters and keep your occupancy rates very high and stable. And there is a annual inspection going on, where the government is sending an inspector and ensuring that your property is not damaged. Think about it not as a nuisance, but as something that is useful to you. An experienced inspector is walking into somebody's house and ensuring that they have not really damaged your property. So that's free for you. Of course, you also have to take care. I mean, it's a two-sided coin. I mean, if you haven't really, like provided basic amenities and so on, so then you are required to. And but for a fair-minded landlord or an owner or a property manager, this is a really good opportunity. Only a very small number of them participate. The point is to open it up and make everyone aware. One of the reasons why I'm on the podcast, that these things exist, and then you can come to our website and then you can register within about a minute, and then the AI will find you renters and so on.
Yeah, then exactly, AI find renter. How does your platform match renters with active watcher to units that qualify?
Yeah, I mean, vouchers are issued in our platform, so we know it's a valid voucher, and we have, as I told you, there is quite a bit of calculations that go into, can this renter afford this unit? Yeah, and what is likely going to be the, in doing that, you also need to estimate what the utilities costs are going to be, and so on. So that's, it's not easy for a leasing assistant that you hire to take out a calculator and do all these things and say, oh, this is a voucher holder that is applicable for us, and then do that. So usually they drop them. It's difficult. It's too difficult for us. So, and then they drop. But we can do it, right? Our software is doing it. So it's basically translating it into a market renting situation. So, oh yeah, this is a valid voucher. Don't worry about it. The rent is okay. So that's all that they really need to know. But answering that question requires a lot of data collection and do that. So that's one part. Second is the regular marketplace matching of one with the other. So this is where they want to live, and this is where the unit is, and this is viable, and also the mechanical things of scheduling a showing and reminding people that they actually go for the showing and so on. So that everything needs to be done for the process to work. So that's what we do. I should say that's what this AI agent does.
Is doing, yes. No, that's unbelievable. Okay, then every funder faces friction points. What have been the biggest challenges for you at Bob.ai as you expanded into 19 cities right now, I think?
Yeah. So the big one was COVID. Like, as initially COVID was a big problem for us. We were at that point, our primary product was an inspection, scheduling and optimizing product. And of course, you can't do any inspections because you are not allowed to go into anyone's house. Inspection itself is not feasible. So why do you need? That was a big one. And everything's. There was no procurement. There was. Even otherwise, we are in an industry where it's difficult to raise money. So when we have, let's say, 50% of our revenues from the private market, then it's a different. We are seen as a proptech. and AI proptech. And there is it's easy to raise money when 99% of our revenue is coming from the government. So we are seen as a government tech startup, and it's a different situation. So COVID was a difficult period for us, definitely a difficult period for us. And I also have to say I've been in many industries, like railroad is one that I'm really fascinated by the processes that they have. It's quite complex, various reasons why it's like that. In this industry is also like that, it's quite complex. And there are good reasons why we have these rules and why they have these processes and why they are like that. So learning that, the startup team has to learn. Everyone has to understand the why of everything. If you want to very rapidly make a product that scales across many programs and cities and so on, so you would need your backend programmer who is a Python programmer also to know a certain amount of industry jargon and the why of the processes and so on. So it's a bit challenging, but we have a really good engineering team. I'm super happy with them. So the problems are big, but we are up to the challenge.
Bravo. Very nice. Okay, then you're building AI that touches public sector workflows, sensitive data, and decision with long-term impacts. How do you approach privacy, safety, and compliance in a way that earn trust?
Yeah, that's extremely important, right? We are holding people, so it's a good number. We are holding how much money they have in the banking account, how much, everything about. So everything is encrypted, like addressed and in transmission. So all these best practices of a cloud application we follow, and no data is used in AI training. Never, we would never use a service that would use data for AI training. So those basic things that all good startups that are responsible for any kind of data, that we follow we put in a lot of effort into it. So that's taken care of. And then there is another side to a question, like you are talking about a renter renting from a marketplace. So is there a bias in it? Is there you can say that in this marketplace, the power is more with the people with the units to rent than the renters. So is there any discrimination? And there are a lot of laws around that you cannot discriminate people based on race or ethnicity or things like that. So you are asking an AI agent to do this. So does it have any impact? By itself, an agent, there is a lot of hype around it, but by itself, an agent wouldn't have any bias. But you are also supplying it a lot of data on both sides, so that it's making the matching and it's doing that. And then there are conversations that people are having too. So we read all those things, then make sure that all the laws are complied with, and then if there is anything that need to be flagged, we flag it and so on. So then we learn as we go along. This is a new area. AI is doing an important task, leasing.
Okay. Yeah. Then, thanks to AI, let's talk outcomes. Some authorities are reporting major gains, faster processing, smaller backlog, and better visibility. Which result means the most for you?
I think all three. I know
All
it's
of the above.
lazy answer, but all three. Faster processing. It affects people's lives. And then I told you once, there's an expiring voucher that you are talking about. So if you don't get it done in 90 days, you make it an extension for 30 days, but that's it. And then you're back in the line, and you've been meeting them for 7 years, 5 years, and so on. So that's a bit of a cruel outcome to happen. And it happens for majority of people. Only about 1/3 of vouchers actually get utilized. The 2/3, this is the story. This is the outcome. So all three. So, and we are scaling now. So we are, as I told you, we didn't build the whole product and then start selling the whole product. We started building pieces of it, and there were buyers for the pieces of software. We are the only one doing it. So for example, you have a relocation problems, you can buy a relocation app and then do that. You have a portability problem, and people want to port from your housing authority to some other, you can do that. You have an inspection problem, you can just buy that app. And by doing that, we built everything, and now we have the whole product, the entire ERP with the finance module integrated. So you can replace your legacy with what we have. I told you in the beginning, right? What they essentially use is an integration to HUD, essentially telling HUD, hey, we have issued this voucher, hey, you be ready to pay this rent. So that's that integration that goes into HUD. and a finance module is what they're using, everything else being done on paper. So now we have the entire software for doing everything. And then when you also have the finance module and the integration to HUD, then you have a full product. So until now, everybody who buys our product is paying for two software companies. The company that is providing this pipe to HUD and this finance module, and us, we do all the core operations, and then we somehow integrate to these products, and then they send it. Now they don't need to; they can just use our product for everything. That's and we're just introducing that to the market. So I'm fairly certain that we'll scale fairly rapidly next year. Yeah. And then we would focus on visibility and fast processing.
Okay. I love it. And okay, then you mentioned wanting to help renters transition from renting to ownership by 2026, 2027. Why is that
7 and
important?
so on. So there is, I mean, think about what it actually achieves. Think about, I mean, it's a difficult problem. So everyone, I mean, we also set it aside for the time being, but think about what it actually achieves. People, I mean, you really cannot move into the middle class in the US unless you have some assets. Like essentially you need to own your home to be in the middle class. I mean, that's how I see it. Maybe there could be other ways to look at it, like, but by and large, that's one yardstick you can use. Like, hey, do you have, I mean, it's a house, and then it depreciates, and then you have some assets and so on. But there are programs where you can actually be owning that house that you are renting, and the government is paying the rent, and that can continue, and government will pay the mortgage for some years, and then you transition to ownership. So there are so many things that need to be aligned so that people can actually transition into home ownership. It's not that there is no appetite for that on the client side. They do, if people want to move, but everything need to come together. Just like I said, like whole bunch of things need to come together, and then it can scale. Not 0.1%, not 0.2%. I'm talking about 5%, 6% of the renting population can move every year. Then you have really large numbers of people transitioning into. I think it's doable, and technology has a big part to play. And yeah, and we will take a shot at it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful, and it makes a lot of sense. And then, what does success look like for you long term?
Success would be homeownership. If we are able to every month,
Everybody.
yeah. So a lot of, let's say we reach about even 1,000 renters moving into homeownership across the country, across all states. That would be a massive success in terms of both impact and also having revenues and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, and if you look ahead 5 years, what changes you expect in proptech and specifically in systems that serve lower income communities?
5 years. I mean, with this AI and robotics in play, 5 years is like an eternity to think.
Yeah,
5 years
exactly.
you may not. I mean, in one scenario, there may be no poverty, like there may be no affordable housing needed, because we are going into a phase where the economy is growing 10% per year. I mean, then all of these problems just go away. And they could also be very large scale construction of manufactured homes, like super beautiful, well full functioning homes, or robots creating, humanoids creating houses where the house prices are 1/10 of what it is. All of those things can happen in 5 years. So I mean, we are going through a peculiar phase in human history, or that 5-year predictions are nearly impossible for anyone to make right now. Yeah, and I'm excited about all that. Like we have a mission-driven company, and yeah, we will adapt. And if these technologies are changing that way, and we would be the number one, the first company to say, oh, yeah, homeownership actually means manufactured homes, or like depending on what happens, we'll adapt. Yeah, I'm not worried about that at all. Like I'm actually
No.
excited about change.
No, that's amazing what you're doing, and you have built a company that touches real lives and solves real problems. And then, what drives you personally to keep going in an industry that is anything but simple?
Yeah, anything but simple. That's very true. This is anything but simple. I mean, that's very true.
What drives you personally?
Personally, I mean, I always liked work. I've been very fortunate in my entire life, so I've never actually worked where I didn't really like my work. Maybe 1 or 2 years here and there, but more or less, I always liked what I was doing. So I think it's cliche, but if you like what you're doing, it's not really that hard to do it. Like I don't have a major work-life balance problem or anything like that. I never had it, more or less. I mean, I liked what I was doing, so I didn't find it very extremely difficult to do. Or I mean, I spend a lot of hours, like even now, when I have to. But I don't find it that difficult to do because I just most of my work I like. I mean, of course, you also have payroll to do. You have taxes to file. I don't like them, but I do them. I don't do them that well, but I do. But more or less all my work I like. I mean, I spend most of the time, about 70-80% of my time with the product team, doing
That's
design,
wonderful.
engineering. So these things I like.
Of
I
course,
also
of
have the
course.
flexibility to hire people for doing things that I don't like. So
Then
overall, I have nothing to complain.
definitely. Then what has this mission taught you about leadership as you were talking about your team?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it's not. I cannot say that I learned it here, but I've known it for a few years, maybe 10, 15 years. It's about the team. So, I mean, I think luck is a big factor. Whichever way you look at it, you have to be kind of lucky to get the right team in. You can make a lot of effort to make sure that you don't make mistakes, but to a large extent, it depends on, to some extent, I should say, not large, but to a significant extent, depends on your luck in hiring the right people, make the right team. I mean, you have pressures every time, right? You need to hire quickly. You don't have that much money. So, but if you land upon a good team, if you assemble a good team, everything is so much more easy and fun. I mean, everything I said about AIU, like work is not difficult, only applies if you have a good team. I can imagine a scenario where the team is different and then work is not fun. Getting that right, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
yeah, I mean,
beautiful.
it's not entirely in your hands, yes, but you can. Every founder, in my opinion, should make the biggest effort to get the team right.
That's right. Okay, one thing you wish every landlord knew about voucher.
Oh yeah, maybe 8.5 years of steady rental income and practically no problems in rent collection. What you would hear, like, you just have this knowledge. Oh, these renters would trash my home. That's not true. It might happen, like just like it would happen with the market rental, but the numbers are very clear. The chances of your homes getting trashed or anything is low. Yeah, and that's it's a extremely desirable renter that you're dealing with. Yeah, come to a website and you can find a renter. And we would help you find a renter. Yeah.
That's great. Bejoy, this was a wonderful conversation, and thank you for sharing your journey and your work with us. Can you tell us, for our listeners, where they can find your work or yourself, talk to you, if they need so? Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. It was a great conversation. Joy, thank you again.
Thanks, Laurent.
Thank you. And that's it for today's episode of AI InterConnect. And if you enjoy it, share it with someone who's building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. Thank you.